Hey everyone, so this was the annual road trip that me and Bri do every year. As you can see here, it's taken us through a big portion of the Great Plains, and that was pretty interesting to see. And we eventually got to our target area here of the Rocky Mountains in mostly Colorado. And we spent a decent bit of time here. Not a lot of herps to see, but this really wasn't a herping trip. It was more of a vacation. And we got to see some really beautiful scenery here. I mean, some of the biggest mountains I've ever seen, but some cool wildlife too. Right here's a marmot, which pretty much just looked like a groundhog, but it's different. And then we saw this thing, it's called a pika. They were adorable. And then the coolest thing we saw in the Rockies was definitely this big bull moose. Not the best picture though. After that, we took off into Utah, which was the beginning of the Great Basin Desert. And right here was where we really started to get into some habitat that could have some herps in it. But like I said, mainly it was about the scenery. But yeah, it was pretty cool. This was the most common herp we saw. This was a western whiptail. They were pretty neat. They were everywhere. I lost track of how many I saw. I think it was around like 7 or 8. But they're really cool lizards. If I had to compare it to something back home, I'd probably say like a six-lined race runner or something. Similar movements and behavior, but it was pretty cool seeing them. Definitely the most common herp of the trip. So after seeing several western whiptail lizards, I spotted somebody photographing something, and it was this guy. This is an eastern collared lizard. This was really awesome to see. This is something that I've wanted to see in the wild for a while now, and it was really cool. I wasn't able to get the best footage of it, but I probably wouldn't even have noticed it if I wouldn't have saw this guy taking pictures. But it was pretty cool. He didn't know what it was, so I was able to stop, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's an eastern collared lizard. But yeah, another life or species, and pretty cool to see. So this was our third species of herp for the day. This was a plateau fence lizard. Very similar in appearance to the eastern fence lizard. Good to add to the species count. So that next day we dipped back into southwestern Colorado, and as you can see, it's very similar habitat, maybe just a tad bit greener, but still part of that Great Basin Desert. The only herp we found that day, other than this, I think it's a plateau striped whiptail. I'll have to add the species at the bottom. But we also found a DOR Great Basin gopher snake, but it was dead, so I didn't take any pictures of it. But yeah, only one herp at that spot, at least one live one, just that lizard. So later that night, we were riding back into Utah, and we cruised this midget faded rattlesnake. Kind of a silly name, but it was really cool to see. Definitely a lifer species. This one had unfortunately been clipped by a car. You can see in the midsection where he's bleeding a little bit. He was still alive and alert and everything like that, but I hope he made it. I was able to move him off the road. Hopefully he's okay after that. You can see he was in a little bit of stress there, but like I said, moved him off carefully, and yeah, I hope he makes it, but still a really cool find. So that next day, we didn't get any herping in, but we did spend a good portion of the afternoon at Bryce Canyon National Park. It was absolutely beautiful here. I mean, you just look at some of the scenery. I actually thought it was a little bit more visually stunning than the Grand Canyon, but I saw some cool wildlife like the Steller's jay, and then we were watching several of these chipmunks moving around. It was still too hot for snakes to be on the move, but there were Great Basin rattlesnakes and gopher snakes in this area that are definitely preying on those guys. Then we got a real up close look at this buck mule deer. And then in this next one, you can see we saw a few pronghorn antelope. That was definitely a lifer for me. We did cruise a DOR Great Basin rattlesnake, but unfortunately it was dead when we found it. But we spent that next day after that. The next several days we were in Vegas for a little bit. And as you can see here, we're driving through the Hoover Dam area. Stopped in Arizona, saw this really cool quail. And then right after we saw this quail, there was a mother quail that ran in front of our car with like 6 little babies. I wish I could have got that on video. But after that, we went into New Mexico for several days, and we got out to do some road cruising the one night, and We found a DOR coach whip, which was kind of a bummer, but then what we found after that was actually really cool. So this was the last live snake that we found on the trip, and this was down a gravel road near this wildlife refuge. This is a western diamondback rattlesnake. This was one of my main targets that I wanted to find on the trip, so of course it was the last snake that we found while we were on the trip, but this was really cool. This is the closest cousin to the eastern diamondback rattlesnake, which I've never found, and obviously this is a lifer. These guys are fairly common throughout the Southwest, especially in New Mexico, so I knew that our chances of finding one were pretty good if we cruised the right habitat. But still, common or not, I'm not from that area, so finding it was really cool. This was a decent sized snake, probably about 3.5 feet long, so it could have been a full grown adult, but I still want to lean towards the fact that it had some growing left to do. But this snake was really cool. It didn't rattle once while I was filming it. Even when I had to move it off the road, when I was done filming, it didn't rattle or anything like that. It was just really easy going. And that's cool. I mean, there were a lot of these kangaroo rats that were hopping around across the street, so I can only assume that this snake was out hunting them, but really cool way to end the trip. Such an awesome snake.